Is it really possible to eliminate all of our prospecting troubles?
Yes, but it's not easy. I'm
Sure.
sorry to say. Um, I think what's important to put some meat around the bones on that answer is, what are the reasons people have troubles with prospecting? And I've experienced these myself. I continue to experience these through other people who that work on my team, people I don't work with who share their troubles with me, and it kind of whittles down, five main points really. One, for a lot of people, they just don't know how to get started. I know it sounds very basic, but it's kind of like they start their working day, probably in their spare bedrooms right now, and they know they should be doing it, but it's kind of, they procrastinate. They don't know where to begin. For many people, I find this is a real big problem. They've never actually been told how to prospect. And when I say that, I mean like specifically what to do, what to say, tactically how to approach prospecting. Number three, they don't make time for it. I think so many people are guilty of this. They just think they know it's that thing that it's like going to the gym. I should do it, but I'm too busy. I haven't got time for it. Where do I fit it in my day? Number four, out of the five, they've got a fear of it. Maybe we can dive into that. And number five, this is a trouble that is really emphasized by the ever-changing world of sales and digital sales. It's harder than ever to get the attention of our prospects. And there is the whole world of prospecting and digital selling has made it, in some respects, easier for salespeople to prospect. In other respects, it's made the whole world a bit noisier and difficult. So anyway, all these things are solvable, Will. Every single one of them. It's not easy, though, but they are all solvable.
I love when you frame it up like this because when you break it down, we're not trying to solve world hunger, are we? We're not trying to do an Elon and get people on Mars, which if that is possible, and there's at least billions, tens of billions of dollars being thrown at that, these are, when we frame it up like this, these are easily solvable for most people, right?
I'm sure there's people sat listening to this podcast right now thinking, yeah, that I experienced that, but I can get around it, and I experienced that, and I can get around that. But actually, for so many people, they don't go somewhere to address these troubles. And I feel for some people, especially if you consider what a lot of people have experienced over the past, coming up to 12 months now, young people just getting a start in sales, SDRs, BDRs as an example, all they've ever known is kind of their spare bedroom. They've never met their manager in person. They've never met their colleagues, and they're expected to, every day be on it, create new conversations with their target audience, and they're experiencing all of those things that I mentioned, and they feel a bit isolated and cut off and a little bit lonely, and it's more difficult than ever to for those people to address those troubles, even though on the face of it they seem like they're things that I can, I've got it in me to tackle those things.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not belittling it, especially when we'll talk about fear shortly as well, because that's something that I physically had and had to break through. And I wish I had a better way, but I just got my head down and like a knuckle dragging idiot, just made enough calls, knocked enough doors to knock it out myself. There may be a better strategy than that because that was not perhaps not advised. But where I want to start with, you mentioned, I think it was point number two then, that people just not taught how to prospect. Now, should this be surprising to us in that there's so much information online? We put out so much content. There's this podcast, all the other podcasts, the training that we do. Should salespeople, and clearly you hire salespeople as a VP of sales, should salespeople come to the job knowing how to at least do the gist of this, to have some frameworks of how to prospect? Or is it on an organization to train them from scratch?
That's a good question. I do think it's maybe the politician's answer, but it's a bit of both. I think when I think back to when I started as what was essentially an SDR role, it wasn't called that at the time, in sales. The amount of information that I had at my fingertips was actually really limited. And we're not going back to the dark days here, even though I am, getting on a bit. We are, my access to sales knowledge really was, maybe the odd YouTube video here and there. But even YouTube, if you go back 13 years ago, wasn't what it is today with the depth of content. Podcasts weren't really a thing. And LinkedIn, which is such an enormous source of information, was really nothing more than just a kind of a digital sort of CV networking site at the time. And so actually fast forward to 2021, and there is so much content for any salesperson to essentially learn the ropes. I post every day about various things to do with prospecting or general sales tips. There is so much like free content there that I think rewind back 5 years ago, people would be charging access for. And so there is really no excuse for people not to absorb that content. The difficult thing is, again, it's the difference between learning and doing. I can sit and watch a video about how to lose weight and feel good about myself, but whether I actually go and do the diet properly, do the exercise is the other thing. And that's where I think the company has to come in. They have to help salespeople execute. Salespeople have to want to do it, first of all. But I do think a lot of companies do let their salespeople down. I think a lot of companies, when it comes to prospecting, is a little bit like, hey, here's a phone, make it happen. And they say, you make cold calls, objection handle, but they're not actually specifically breaking down exactly the steps, the process, the frameworks that salespeople need in order to do those things. So, I think it's really a bit of both.
So we maybe come back to some of the frameworks and stuff in a second, because that's practical and the audience can take something away from that. But I feel like a lot of the issue here is just, it's almost an overabundance of people. We clearly sell a training program over at salesman.org, but really what it is a curriculum that we're selling. You could listen to every single podcast that we've ever produced, and all the podcasts that I've been on other people's shows, where I talk about our research with our sales code assessment and the tools that we have. I don't tend to talk about them so much on this show because I don't want to kind of like pitch the audience aggressively. But you could listen to all that content and you probably get 90% of the curriculum that we share. But the value in our paid training product is the fact that it's laid out day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. And I feel like when we talk about the fact that there's so much information out there, a lot of it is just finding where these puzzle pieces are put together. So that could be done with corporate training. It could be done whether you pay for training yourself. There's books like yourself, like your book, Richard, Problem Prospecting, that covers this as well and puts it in a framework. So I don't think the problem is, or I think you're being somewhat lazy and you're not making an effort if you're saying the problem is you don't know how to prospect. And clearly there's data that can come from your internal organization to refine the prospecting, but the general strategy, it's out there. So I don't want to cover that too much on this episode. But fear is something that can hold you back. You could know everything and not put into practice because you're fearful of prospecting. So how do we get around this hurdle? Yeah,
and I think fear when it comes to prospecting is probably most relevant to certain activities when it comes to prospecting than others. And I'll single out the phone and making cold calls as being probably the thing that most people fear the most when it comes to prospecting. And believe me, I've been there. Like when I was starting in this role in lead generation, here's what the scene looked like, Will. I was part of a small company. There was maybe about 7 or 8 employees sat in an office. At times, that office was quiet, even sometimes deadly silent. And the one person who was expected to get on the phone all day was me. And as someone who'd never been trained or coached on what to say, how to say things on a cold call, the thought of me picking the phone up and feeling that the entire office was hearing exactly what I was saying and hanging on every word I was saying and hearing my mistakes, and when a call clearly hadn't gone very well, feeling that everybody would know that and they were judging me on my performance, was terrifying. And what happens? You kind of just you think of every other thing to do that isn't picking the phone up. You naturally go hide behind emails, or you sort of kid yourself that you've made more calls in a day than you actually have. And this fear is, when I've shared this kind of story, is like resonates with so many people. People are like, that is me. And so it's, first of all, I just want to make the point that it's real. I understand why people have it. It's like, it goes against all of your human nature that you've ever been told as a young kid of like calling strangers.
Stranger danger.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, it goes against all of your human morals and inhibitions in some respects. But there was one big thing that I realized, that the lesson that I learned, which really completely addressed my idea of fear of cold calling, was to just completely remove yourself away from the outcome of that call. And what I mean by this is, I think so many companies have got people in who are prospecting into the mindset of, you need to make every single conversation, every single connect that you get, got to make sure, do everything possible to make that convert that into a meeting or a demo or whatever that outcome is. And you're going to get far less conversations than voicemails and gatekeepers. Got to make the most of those. And if you don't get it, it's like a disaster. When you have that mindset that finally the decision maker, the person that you're wanting to call, answers the phone and they don't want to meet with you, it almost feels like you failed. And it kind of strikes that fear into you wanting to go again, to pick the phone up again. But if you just have the mentality of, hey, all I'm doing here is finding people who either want to talk with me more or have a problem that I know I can help solve, or find people who don't have a problem that I can help solve. And that's my objective. And I'm totally happy if I find people who I can't help right now. Then everything else just felt easier. It was like every conversation I had, like, I didn't have any fear anymore. I was just like, hey, all I'm doing here is just trying to find the relatively small number of people that I can actually help. And yes, knowing the structure and the frameworks, that all contributed to me feeling more confident. But simply just detaching myself from this kind of pressure of, I need to make sure every person who answers the phone has the best possible chance of converting into a meeting. I just deleted that from my whole mindset, and the fear just kind of dissolved away.